Welcome to the Careers by Jenn podcast, episode 246. This time on the podcast, Jenn speaks with John Voris about what constitutes an authentic career. My guess is that in an authentic career, one is able to bring one's whole self to one's work, giving the fullest expression possible to the desires of the heart, which in my case would be a career which includes the eating of potato chips.
You're listening to the Careers by Jenn podcast. I'm your host, Jenn Swanson. This is the podcast that helps you to get the job, love your work, and advance your career. Careers by Jenn is a listener-sponsored podcast, and if you like the content, please consider supporting the show as a patron. You can do so for as little as $1 a month. Head over to CareersbyJenn.com and click on Support to learn more. I want to be authentic. I'm sure you do too. Sometimes, though, I think the word authentic is getting overused and it feels somehow less meaningful. My guest today is philosopher, educator, author, and psychological researcher John Voris, and I began our conversation by asking him what an authentic career means to him. Find out his answer after this. Do you want someone to listen? Do you need help setting goals for yourself? Do you want someone to keep you accountable for your progress and to ask good questions that will help to move you toward your success? Have you got a resume that you want reviewed or updated? Do you need help deciding what kind of work you'd like to transition into? If any of these sound like you, I've got some coaching spaces open at Careers by Jenn, and I would be happy to work with you to achieve your goals. From a single session resume review to multi-session career or life coaching, there are several packages to choose from. Go to CareersbyJenn.com, click on Online Programs, and you will see the coaching packages on the Courses page. Select your package, and let's get started on your future today.
Well, I picked up the word authentic from Jean-Paul Sartre. And the idea is to be an authentic person is that you do follow your internal instincts and you are good to your word. And you're not influenced by those around you to become someone who you're not. You are truly an authentic person working from your own motivations.
Okay, and that's helpful. And so if we're talking about that as an authentic person, what do we mean when we talk about an authentic career?
That it stems from your authentic identity.
Okay, so it's...
All right, I'll go a little further.
Yeah.
I believe that, we're all born with a starter kit, you might say. And that starter kit, of course, is genetic. And this starter kit is designed for anyone to be born anywhere in the world, and it's a starter kit. I'd call it the virtues of humanity. And when you're born with that, it's a starter kit, so you can now experience life as a human and derive pleasures and achievements and live your life. And this starter kit consists of love, justice, wisdom, and power. And everyone has this capacity, and everyone experiences all four, and wherever they are in the world, and it is where their motivation is, and that starts your authentic identity. So it's like the starter kit gives you the form, and then your experience gives the content, and that's your authentic identity.
And so, but not everybody knows they have this kit.
No, you're right. Yes. That's what I do. I work with career counselors, for example, and I help people find their authentic identity. And it is beneath language. That's why I have a book about just that, about your authentic identity, and how that functions, regardless of if you're aware of it or not. And it actually drives your personality.
So that's the Discover the Power That Drives Your Personality, your book.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so how did you come to write this book?
Well, actually, I've been practicing this for many years. I started in 1980, believe it or not, and using it. I actually used it in sales, and but all my information was derived from Europe, and I used it in sales, and I was able to discover at least their primary motivator of my prospects. And in so doing, I was able to, in a sense, language whatever I'm selling into that motivation that I captured, and that's how I was able to sell. And so I did this for years, and when I described what I had done to my associates, they said, well, you need to get that out in the world. And so I started workshops and seminars and individual assessments. And then finally, this year is the first time I actually wrote a book.
So it's been a long time in coming.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Yeah. So I actually used this for 20 years in door-to-door cold call sales. And I used to sell 12 to 14 out of 20, which is very, very, very high. And I had taken all the seminars and workshops on sales that were available at the time. And for some reason, I fell through the cracks. Other people did benefit. And so I felt like there was something wrong with me. I really couldn't deal with the rejection out in the sales field. And I just thought that whole career was over. But I returned to it later on, but I used this method from Europe and to get my answers.
So this includes helping people to know about the love, justice, wisdom, and power?
Yes, what they do is, for example, I do have some of my people I had worked on as an example for you. But everyone has events in their life that become somewhat either one event's traumatic or a series of events, and they make a decision as to what life is all about. And what that does is trigger their life theme, which could be love, justice, wisdom, or power. And that is what the book is about, but that's also what really starts the ball rolling as far as your interpretation of the world is concerned. So if you're a justice person, then you look at the people you care about through the eyes of justice, and you look at what you need to know through the eyes of justice, and you look at the power, your will through the eyes of justice. And so you can see that your life is all conformed to expressing that authentic identity.
So when we talk about looking at a person listening to this, looking for a career that feels more authentic to who they are, mm-hmm. They have to do some introspection. They have to do a little bit of examination of their past, their experience, their history. Where would a person begin?
That's the problem. The problem is that it's beneath language. That's why the book is called Discover the Power That Drives Your Personality. It's beneath your personality. You could find it. And one way of doing it is just wherever you're at, look around you. If this is your office or your room, and say to yourself, everything that's in this room was a previous decision. And these decisions were made based on me expressing who I am. So I should stop and say, this was all derived from a European perspective of symbolism. It's not complex. All it is that what we do is we take an object and we give it a name, and now it symbolizes itself and others like it. For example, a computer. My computer I'm looking at now is the computer and represents all other computers. And so when we think about symbols, well, the way we're taught in America is, in fact, when I ask people to give me a list of symbols, they'll say the logo of baseball teams, football teams. They might say the cross, religious symbols, and they stop because they were intended. They're symbols that were created to represent ideas. But in Europe, the view is everything in that room is a symbol. The floor is a symbol. The wall is a symbol. Everything on your desk is a symbol. So when you look at it that way, then you can start seeing who you really are by what you have in that room. And it works. It worked for 20 years. So anyone, wherever you're sitting, look at the things around you and know that they are all tethered to who you are, and you will find a pattern of meaning.
It's funny, I wrote a book in 2015 myself, and it was called What They See, How to Stand Out and Shine in Your New Job. And I talked about everything at your desk being a communication.
Yes, you're telling the world who you are.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And your clothing and what's on your desktop and all that kind of thing.
Exactly. So I pull together objects, events, and people and discover what is their primary motivator. And once I did that, then I sold them. But now what I'm doing after when I retired was say, I want to work with counselors and consultants and help their clients find what really motivates them beneath what they've been taught to believe about themselves, which is a little different. In other words, if people aren't happy, and maybe it's because they're not aware of who they really are. Because if you're aware of who you are, then you know that that there are real possibilities for you, and they conform to who you are. And if you make a selection out of that conforming possibilities, they become opportunities, and then it's an authentic choice. And that really is the format for being content in life, you might say.
So if a person is listening to this and doesn't have access to a counselor or somebody who works with this model and doesn't have access to a book, where would they begin to really, if they're not happy and they know it, but they don't know why, what would be a first step?
First step would be to look at the objects around you and say, there's two layers of meaning. One is social. A computer is a computer. But then the second one is you made the choice, so it's personal to you. So ask yourself, who would own that and why did I buy it? And then write it down. Then look at something else. Who would own that and why did I buy it? And you're going to find that there's going to be a pattern there, and it'll tell you your deeper motivation in life that you probably did not. You felt it, but you didn't know it. My clients tell me that what I revealed to them is something they knew, but they just couldn't put it in language. And once you put it in language, you can have control over it rather than having it control over you. So if you go through that process, and you will find a pattern, because there's another foundational principle I work with, and that is the human mind only has one need. That one need is to express their authentic identity. And we do it through conforming symbols of meaning, which are objects, events, and people. But we have one need. The rest are all wants and desires. So if you know that everything in that room is tethered to you. So all you have to do is do the interpretation of what you see.
You must have fun riding on the bus.
Why is that?
Because you'd be looking at everyone and trying to figure it out, I think.
Oh, well, that's a good point. I have to turn it off.
I bet.
I really do. But I do. But this is really so simple that I taught this to my daughter when she was 14. So she was reading symbols at 14, and she was reading the deeper intention of people at 14.
What did that do for her? How did that help or hinder her?
Oh, it showed her who her real friends were. It showed when people weren't telling her the truth. It showed herself what really motivated her, and how to avoid the issues that would really cause problems in her life. That was a large step for her. But it ends up to be touching everything about your daily life.
So you could maybe use this as a tool to not get taken if somebody's trying to do something and they're not being authentic.
That's right. No, that's very true. Now I use that in business. I've also assessed people in organizations that were having conflict. And what they discovered is that they weren't having conflict between each other. It was conflict between the life themes, which is very different. So if you're a power person and you're going to have issues with love people, and that's where the conflict lies. It doesn't matter who the love person is or the power person is. It's these themes have specific directions and considerations, and it comes with attitudes. And so that's like oil and water, love and power people. And this bore out in all the assessments that I've done. I've done several hundred assessments over the last 10 years. And I have an algorithm and patterns of people. And comes out to be very, very true. That's where the conflict is.
Can you break down just briefly for us the sort of the key attributes of somebody in each of the four categories?
Sure, absolutely. So the love people are humanitarians, and they're very much aware of the needs of others, and they're very easily able to empathize and identify with others. And love, it finds their expression and purpose in advocating and being a champion for humanity. So those are the people, for example, that are very close to global warming issues. That's about loving the planet, caring for everyone. The next one is the wisdom. These are the people who can grasp knowledge rather rapidly, but they have an obsessive need to know. They're very, very curious far beyond what the other three archetypes are. And they're the teachers and the counselors. And the justice people are a combination of the love and wisdom. In other words, it's sentimentality plus fact. When you mix sentimentality plus fact, you generate morality and the concepts of morality and ethics. And they're able to guide others. They are also good counselors, but they would work very well as a psychologist, psychotherapy, and they're somewhat of the arbiter and negotiator of what's right and wrong and fair in the world. The power people, they have a capacity to generate meaning and purpose for others, to place them into action. And they provide opportunities so they can express themselves fully, but with the idea of change. They're very responsible people, and they are willing, this is very important, they're willing to be disliked in a way that the other three are not. And that's what really separates them. And it makes sense, because if you're the leader, if you are the president of the company or whatever it might be, you can't afford to ask the opinions of everybody around you. You're the leader. That's what you're there to do. And they know that intuitively. And so they'll make decisions that other people won't like, and they're okay with it. That's why the other three just have a hard time with being a leader.
So do you have to fall into one category exclusively, or can you be part of more than one?
No, if you're a love person, so for example, if you're a caring, say you could be a psychotherapist, and you could also write about psychotherapy, and you could be a leader in the industry, but you're basing it on the power of caring for humanity. And you could do the same thing with all four. There's leaders in each domain, but they have to be expressing that domain. So if a love person trying to work in the world of justice is going to have a problem, because there's not going to be that empathy that they would normally have. There's blockages there. And so that's the only issue, is they have to be careful where they're expressing themselves, what domain.
So are you familiar with the Enneagram?
Yes.
So would this be like an Enneagram sorting, the sorting hat from, or Myers-Briggs? Is this another tool, or is this something different?
No, it's something very different. It is a tool, but the four, I discovered these four by reading anthropology, of all things.
Oh.
And yes, and so the ancients, there's been studies on the ancient shamans, and I've traced this throughout history of these four, and ancient shamans would call the love the mother archetype, wisdom would be the teacher archetype, justice would be the visionary, and power would be the warrior. And that's quite consistent throughout many countries and history. And in fact, it goes back to the Egyptians. This is what I wanted to find. I wanted to find something that is foundational, because it occurred to me, I was reading a book, Captain Cook and his adventures, and it says he traveled the four corners of the earth trying to find treasure. Well, why four corners? Why would you call? They knew the earth was round. Where did we ever get that? Really, where did we ever get that phrase? Then the sailors would work on the basis of north, south, east, and west. We think of directions: forward, backward, left, and right. And I started to look at this, and this pattern of four is consistent. And in fact, the same anthropologists discovered there are four basic shapes, which is the circle, the triangle, the X, and the square in ancient buildings, the Mayas, for example, and variations of those four shapes, but four. So this is what took me in that direction. So this is about a state of being and not doing. So most of science tells us what to do, and there are tests that show us how we do it. But I want to know why we do it. So this is the why. So this is getting back to the starter kit. So why we do things stems from these four quadrants, and there's one that's dominant. And in fact, what I do in a class is I say, just what did you do today when you woke up? And they'll tell me I was thinking about the day, and they're thinking about the people they're going to meet, and the obligations, and what they needed to do. And they could not escape these four quadrants. No one does. That's the difference.
This is fascinating.
Yeah, you can't escape it.
So, and I'm just trying to formulate the question here that's floating around in my head. These four, and you say they're everywhere, they're pervasive, they're across cultures,
yeah.
Do we naturally gravitate towards something, or does that vary vastly depending on our experience and our situation? Do people tend to gravitate toward a career or something that they do in their lives because of the quadrant they fit into?
Well, absolutely. They try to. I mean, it's designed to do that. So some people find themselves in exactly the right place. And it's because life in itself gave them opportunities, and they worked in the right direction, and they landed the perfect job. But for many others, this is how it starts. When I was, I think in the fourth grade, I had a fireman come to the class and talk about being a fireman. And everybody, they handed out these red fireman hats. And so what they're doing to us is say, okay, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, we're not experienced enough to say, I want to be myself. So what we do is we have this idea in mind, and there's the parents. The parents are an accountant. Why don't you, hey, accounting is a great career. So before you know it, you're in high school, and everybody's told you what you should do.
Yeah.
By then, what you ought to do has been clouded. And so the way we kind of gravitate is we dislike certain jobs. We don't know why, but we do like other jobs. We really don't know why. We just do. And so if we follow that sense, we'll be okay. But what happens is our thinking minds get in the way and tell us what we ought to do. In this country, it's if you have a choice between being happy and money, the people don't know they're going to pick money almost every time. And at least in the beginning, or like say a career change, or they want to move across the bay and they can make more money, and doing the same thing, but they're happy where they're at. They'll give that up for the more money, and quite often that creates problems. But anyway, so go ahead.
Yeah, we were having a conversation. We have a 17-year-old who has to do something called a capstone project very soon, where she has to sit down for 10 minutes with a peer group with the teachers there and answer questions about what she's going to be doing after high school. And she doesn't know. She is going to go to general studies, but she doesn't really have a sense of her purpose yet. And it almost feels like like the system is forcing kids into something.
Yes.
And the question that I can't stand that people ask kids all the time is, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like,
Yes.
and they equate that with the role that you're going to play, not with what kind of human being do you want to be.
Oh, exactly. I'm with you. And yeah, she shouldn't know what she wants to be because she hasn't had that much experience and opportunities to find out. And this is where people start their down the wrong road. And but before you know it, you're 35 years old and you're not happy. You don't know why. It was because you listened to everyone else.
Yeah, there seems to be such pressure to decide when you're a teenager.
Oh yes, absolutely. And what I do, you touched on something I really enjoy doing, which is assessing students that are around 17 and they're starting to plan their major in college. And I really help them a great deal because they're open and they give straight answers, and we find exactly what the problem is. And on that point, where I really have a lot of passion is so many students are very intelligent and gifted, and they're left out. They have problems. And no one tells them, oh, your reason why you're having problems is you're intelligent. People don't tell them that, unless it's a relative, and they dismiss that. But they really don't see it. And I have had students 17, 18 years old in my office break down and cry because no one has ever told them that. And when I told them that your problem is you're intelligent, and you have to see what the circumstances that generates is and how to deal with it, then his whole life changed in that 1 second. Everything moved, and he changed majors. He did many things.
That's such a gift to somebody because, it seems to be a very small box that we try and put people in without allowing for learning disabilities and family issues and circumstantial problems and all the rest of it. And sometimes people just need a little more time before they can get their feet, on level ground.
Oh yeah, no, your daughter is doing wonderful. I mean, because not knowing is a great place to be, and that way she won't have a bias against her authentic identity.
It's funny though, because I said, so what are you going to do if you don't know? She goes, I'll just make it up.
Well, no, I like that. Just make it up. One is I had a client come to me who wanted to be a police officer like his dad. And he was doing great in college, but then around the time he should be graduating, things slowed down. He didn't know why. He wasn't taking many classes. He wasn't getting the better grades, and he was frustrated. And so what I did is I assessed him. And in that process, he found that we discovered that his dad is a motorcycle cop, highway patrol, and gives out tickets all day. And so that was the problem, because he was a justice person with a great deal of the love domain in him. And that was an issue because all he would do is create conflict for people. So that he didn't know that. And he would never find it on a test. But that was his issue. And so once he got that, I said, well, what other part of the police force could you get into that would make sense? And he says, I took a class on probation and I really enjoyed it. And that made sense. It clicked right in that moment. And he saw what the problem was, how to get around it, and he could still be in law enforcement, which is what he wanted to do for his dad. So it all worked out. But if he dropped out of school when I had seen him. And after that session, he went back to school, and I think it was 7 or 8 months. He found a position that he wanted, and he's been happy ever since.
That's wonderful.
But I have many other issues like that. The one that was very, very surprising is one student was the black sheep of the family. He had problems with school. He problems with drinking. Many things, antisocial. And when I did the assessment, I discovered that he enjoyed rescuing people. And so it occurred to me, it actually just like the hair stood up on my back. I saw it in that moment that if you don't have someone to rescue, who do you make the victim?
Huh.
You've got to have a victim. He was his own victim. So when we got that, he decided to join a missionary, and they do nothing but go around the world and help people in have like hurricanes and whatever it might be. So, and he stopped his drinking, and he has a great relationship with his parents, which was really broken, and life is moving on for him. But that's not something you're going to find in a personality profile test.
Right. So he found his authentic purpose.
Yes, that's the whole point of it. And now when you do, everything falls together. It's an opportunity to make money, to get a sense of achievement, have a sense of self-affirmation. Life had meaning for him and purpose and belonging.
Because otherwise you're fighting against forces.
Yes. So, but the way I describe this too is I say this is Myers-Briggs on steroids. So that'll give you people a little hook. Anyway, so there's many stories that I have that are like that. People loving their job, but they don't like what they do. Or they love what they do and they don't like their job and they don't know why. Well, in a session, we find that out.
Yeah, I've had jobs like that.
Oh yeah, we all have. Yeah, but finding out is what's great. It's like going down a dirt road and there's lots of potholes, but you've got in a car, but your lights are out, and so you're just kind of feeling it with the steering wheel of where these potholes are, and it's dark and everything. Once you do this, it's putting the lights on. The obstacles are still there, but now you know how to get around them. Now you know how to avoid a situation that you know is not going to bring you happiness or contentment.
As you were talking about objects around you being symbols, I've been, it's January and it's decluttering time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I suddenly thought, oh, that could also be useful. Who was I when I got this and who would own this thing?
Exactly.
Am I still that person and do I need this?
You got it. Yeah, well, we do change and we do, we wind up giving up many things that we possess, but that's just because we're maturing. But the difference is let's say someone is a piano player and when taking classes when they're 12, 13 years old, and then you see them when they're 40 and they're playing a clarinet or a trumpet. The issue isn't what it is, but rather it's the larger context, which is being creative and being musical. So that's what you look for. You look for the umbrella concept. What are you really after? So, for example, I would say now the difference between need and want and desire. Say, do you need a car? And my client says, well, of course I need a car. What for? To go to work. Well, why is that? Well, I work about 30 miles away. Well, wait a minute. So what? Why don't you walk? Well, I don't want to walk. That's terrible. So you don't want to walk. That's why you need a car, you see? So now, why is it that you go to work? Believe it or not, I ask that question. They all say, well, to pay the bills. Well, why do you pay the bills? Well, the love people will say, well, I care for my family and I want to make sure that they have what they need. The wisdom people would say, well, everyone knows that you need to have money to pay for the bills. And the other one is, well, it wouldn't be fair if I didn't work to my children. And the other one is, how could they change their life if they don't have the funds to do it? So you see, you have the same situation, but four different archetypes or life themes interpreting the situation.
Huh. Okay, I'm intrigued. Your bio says that you are a philosopher, and I know you don't like that term, but maybe you could explain what that means.
Okay. Yes. well, actually, I received my degree in philosophy at Berkeley. And so I got very well deep into that long ago. And philosophy really is a tool. Notice you can have the philosophy of art, the philosophy of engineering, the philosophy of science, the philosophy of gardening, the philosophy of cooking. Well, how is that possible? So philosophy is not like biology, which is the study of living organisms. Philosophy does not have a subject. It is a tool. And it's a tool that it has a counterpart, which is mathematics. Mathematics is a tool. Philosophy helps us understand the invisible ideas, whereas math helps us understand the physical world of objects. So those are the two tools, major tools that we use. So if I ask you, do you think capital punishment is fair, and you'd say, no, I think it's cruel and unusual, you've given me your opinion. Now, if I ask you why, then what you'll do is bring in your beliefs, your values, your experiences, and you'll weave it into a cohesive argument. When you're doing that, you are in fact philosophizing. So everybody is philosophizing. Now, but philosophy is designed for the abstract and visible ideas. So we use it on morality and ethics and politics or whatever it might be. Mathematics we use on objects. Well, 4 plus 4, 2 plus 2 makes 4. That doesn't mean there's any apples around to count.
Right.
You see, it's a system all to itself. That's what philosophy really is. But we use it to examine other philosophic ideas, because that's what it's designed to do.
Well, thank you for that. That's a lot to think about also now. You're making me think, John.
Well, I'm a wisdom. Remember that.
Oh, are you? Well, there you go.
Yes. So the other thing is, wisdom people always think other people want to know too much, and they don't. And so that's why we bore people to death, you know.
Well, I wouldn't call us that.
Oh, okay. All right.
So if people want to find out more about you, where can they find you?
Well, I'm on the internet, John, at authentic-systems.com. And you can go to, once you get there, go to consulting. You just read the prompts. And consulting, if you want to have an assessment. Otherwise, you can get my book on Amazon, and it's called Discover the Power That Drives Your Personality.
Discover the Power That Drives Your Personality. All right. I'm gonna get that one. What's a last piece of advice for our listener?
Don't be frustrated. You're not to blame. You're not to blame. It's not your fault if you try various courses on money, on careers, or whatever it might be. And if you slip through the cracks, it's not your fault. There's another way of going about it, which comes from Europe. That's what I learned. And I was very frustrated with people really beating themselves up because of failure and feeling bad about themselves, like there's something wrong with them. And what I say to people is, there's nothing wrong. There's only something to be aware of. Once you're aware of your authentic identity, everything comes together. And you know why you were designed to fail in that area, and why you were designed to achieve in other areas. And it just really does make sense. But there's many other aspects to this that, of course, we can't get into now. But it helps out people because they feel it. They feel that there's something there, but they really can't describe it. This describes it for them.
Well, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to help us today. I really appreciate this conversation, and I'm sure the listener will too.
Oh, great. I enjoyed myself too.
You've been listening to Careers by Jenn with Jenn Swanson. If you like what you heard, please share this. You know, if every single person listening today shared this episode with just one friend, our audience would be twice as big, just like that. And the more people we can help with our content, the better. So help out a friend and help grow our audience by sharing this show with someone you know who would benefit from the content. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do that, and together we can make a difference. Until next time, take good care.